The story begins with a young boy named Calvin who lives at the Chesterfield Orphanage in America. Calvin has two close friends, Reg and Murph, and the three of them love playing basketball in the front yard of the orphanage. One morning while they're playing, Ox shows up with a few of his friends. Ox is a troublemaker who also lives at the orphanage and loves bullying the other kids. He challenges Calvin to a one-on-one basketball game for Calvin's favorite basketball jersey. Calvin isn't very good at basketball, so Reg and Murph try to stop him from accepting the challenge. But inspired by his favorite basketball stars, Calvin accepts anyway. The game begins and Calvin struggles badly. He's much shorter, misses easy shots, and Ox easily dominates the game. Calvin loses, and according to the deal, he has to hand over his favorite jersey. Right in front of him, Ox rips the jersey apart, humiliating Calvin and breaking his heart. After this, we see the orphanage caretaker, Mr. Biddleman, assigning the kids to sell candy outside a basketball stadium to raise money for the orphanage. Calvin, along with the other kids, starts selling candy near the entrance. That's when Calvin spots Coach Wagner, the coach of the Knights basketball team, leaving the stadium. Calvin approaches him and tries to sell him some candy, but the coach is in a bad mood because his team just suffered a tough loss. He refuses and starts walking away. Calvin stops him again and explains that the money is for the orphanage. The coach offers to just give him some cash, but Calvin refuses, saying he doesn't know if Mr. Biddleman will actually use the money properly. Impressed, the coach asks Calvin if he's ever seen the Knights play a live game. Calvin sadly says no, they can't afford tickets. Because Calvin refused to take the money honestly, the coach decides to reward him instead. He gives Calvin 4 free tickets to the Knights' next game, and Calvin is overjoyed. Later, we return to the orphanage, where several couples have arrived to adopt children. Calvin is hopeful and believes that maybe today, someone will finally choose them. But Ox crushes his hope, telling him that parents only adopt younger kids, and they're already too old. Calvin becomes deeply disappointed, realizing that once again, none of them may get adopted. The next day, donated clothes and supplies arrive at the orphanage. While sorting through them, Calvin finds a pair of white sneakers. A nun who brought the donations tells him that these shoes once belonged to Michael Jordan. Calvin is a huge fan of Michael Jordan, so he decides to keep the shoes. But suddenly, Ox and his friends show up again. They snatch the sneakers from Calvin, tie the laces together, and throw them over power lines, leaving them hanging high above. That night, a heavy storm pours down. Calvin can't sleep. He can't stop thinking about the shoes. Determined to get them back, he sneaks outside in the rain with Reg and Murph. Calvin climbs a tree and reaches for the sneakers. Suddenly, lightning strikes the power line, and Calvin falls to the ground, still holding the shoes. Miraculously, he isn't hurt at all. Calvin notices the sneakers glowing with a strange light. That's when he realizes these shoes might have some kind of power. The next day, Calvin arrives at the stadium with his friends, holding the tickets the coach gave him. They decide that for once, they won't be selling candy. Today is all about watching a real basketball game. Ox finds out about their plan and tries to scare Calvin. He threatens to tell Mr. Biddleman everything. Calvin panics, but then quickly thinks smart. He offers Ox one of the tickets so he can watch the game with them. Ox agrees, and soon all of them enter the stadium together, excited and amazed as they enjoy the match. At halftime, the star player Tracy is on the court with Coach Wagner. The organizers decide to entertain the crowd by playing a special game. They announce a lottery. One lucky fan from the audience will get a chance to play one-on-one with Tracy. The lottery is drawn, and unbelievably, Calvin's ticket number is chosen. Calvin is beyond excited, but Ox can't stand seeing Calvin this happy. Out of jealousy, he tries to snatch the ticket from Calvin's hands. Using his quick thinking, Calvin dodges Ox and rushes straight onto the basketball court. The game between Tracy and Calvin begins. At first, Tracy treats Calvin like a little kid. He lets him score on purpose, just to entertain the crowd. But very quickly, something strange happens. Calvin keeps scoring again and again. Now Tracy starts taking the game seriously and plays with full focus. Still, Calvin moves too fast. Then Calvin makes an unbelievable high jump and scores once more. The entire stadium is shocked. A small kid has just outplayed a superstar. The crowd goes crazy, and even Tracy is stunned, especially by how high Calvin jumped. All of this is happening because of those old Michael Jordan shoes Calvin is wearing. The next day, Coach Wagner arrives at the Chesterfield orphanage with his manager. They want to ask Mr. Biddleman for permission to let Calvin take one day off and play a match with their team. Biddleman refuses at first, but the moment money is mentioned, he quickly changes his mind and agrees. When Calvin and his friends hear the news, they're overjoyed. Calvin is now going to play alongside real professional basketball players. Calvin and his friends know the truth. This is all because of the shoes. Calvin tells them to keep it a secret, but Ox grows even more jealous. He can't understand how Calvin suddenly became so good at basketball, especially when Ox used to beat him easily. That's when Ox realizes the truth. The power is in the shoes. The very next day, Calvin arrives at the professional match. When Tracy sees him, he looks upset. His teammates have been teasing him non-stop because he lost to a kid. Coach Wagner gives Calvin a Knights jersey and new shoes. but Calvin asks if he can play wearing his old shoes instead. The coach doesn't care. All he wants is for Calvin to play, because a packed stadium means more money. The match begins. By halftime, the Knights are losing badly. Calvin still hasn't been sent onto the court. Calvin finally gathers the courage and asks the coach to let him play. The coach agrees. After all, the team is already losing, so what's the worst that could happen? Calvin enters the game, but moments later he signals for a timeout. He realizes he isn't wearing his old shoes, and panic sets in. Afraid he'll lose without them, Calvin sprints to the locker room, puts his shoes back on, and rushes onto the court again. And then, everything changes. Calvin single-handedly brings his losing team back to a tie. Slowly but surely, he completely dominates the opposing team, all on his own. The crowd rises to their feet, cheering wildly. Calvin's teammates are thrilled. After the game, the Knights coach and manager sign a contract with Calvin, bringing him onto the team for several upcoming matches. Calvin returns to the orphanage to pack his belongings, as he's leaving to travel with the team for upcoming games. That's when Mr. Biddleman approaches him, suddenly acting kind and supportive. Biddleman tries to explain how Calvin should behave, and subtly attempts to win his trust, hoping Calvin will choose him as his legal guardian. But Calvin is smart. He doesn't fall for Biddleman's fake kindness, and leaves without agreeing to anything. Soon after, Calvin is assigned to share a room with Tracy himself. Coach Wagner places Calvin fully under Tracy's responsibility, forcing the two of them to stay together. Tracy clearly isn't happy about it, but Calvin is thrilled. He's rooming with a basketball superstar. Tracy leaves to meet his girlfriend, while Calvin stays back in the hotel room. Excited and unsupervised, Calvin goes wild, ordering tons of food, eating everything, and completely trashing the room. When Tracy returns with his girlfriend, he's absolutely shocked. The room is a total mess, trash everywhere, and Calvin is lying on the floor. Together, they somehow clean up the room and get ready to sleep. But just as Tracy tries to fall asleep, Calvin starts snoring loudly. Tracy can't sleep the entire night. The next day is game day. Tracy is clearly exhausted, struggling to stay awake on the court. Calvin accidentally mentions the snoring situation to the coach. When Coach Wagner hears this, he completely misunderstands the situation and scolds Tracy instead. The coach calls Tracy careless and irresponsible, reminding him that a professional athlete must get proper sleep. He gives Tracy a warning and walks away, leaving Tracy frustrated and annoyed. From there, we see Calvin playing match after match against different teams. Time and again, he wins games all by himself. Calvin becomes a rising superstar. The entire city knows his name. He appears on news channels, gives interviews, wins awards, and gains massive popularity. Despite all the fame, Calvin doesn't forget his orphanage friends. He showers them with gifts and tries to keep them happy. Everyone around him is proud and excited about his success. After one match, Calvin returns to the orphanage and talks with Murph, who is genuinely happy to see how far Calvin has come. As they talk, Ox overhears them. Jealous and angry, Ox tries to grab Calvin's shoes, but before he can do anything, Biddleman steps in and yells at Ox, chasing him away. Biddleman wants to make sure Calvin is never disturbed, because Calvin's success is bringing huge benefits to both him and the orphanage. Later, Calvin leaves again with the team for another tour. Once again, Tracy is assigned as his roommate. This time, Tracy decides to stop at a pharmacy to buy some medicine, hoping it will help him sleep peacefully. He drives there in his car, unaware that Calvin has followed him and is sitting in the back seat. At the pharmacy, Tracy accidentally takes sleeping pills instead of allergy medicine. They return to the car, and as soon as Tracy tries to start it, the pills kick in. He begins to fall asleep. Calvin panics. He doesn't want Coach Wagner to find out that they were out late at night, so Calvin makes a risky decision. He takes the driver's seat himself. With no real experience, Calvin somehow manages to drive the car, crashing through obstacles, knocking things over, and barely keeping control until he finally reaches the hotel safely. The next day, Tracy finds out that Calvin has been suspended because of the late-night driving incident. Tracy feels terrible. He goes to Calvin and sincerely apologizes, knowing the suspension happened because of him. After the game, Calvin returns to the orphanage. Once again, several couples arrive, hoping to adopt a child. This time, every single couple wants Calvin. But Mr. Biddleman only brings forward the parents who clearly aren't suitable. They seem strange, irresponsible, and completely wrong for Calvin. Calvin refuses them all. He decides he'd rather stay at the orphanage with his friends than live with people he doesn't trust. Meanwhile, Murph starts feeling jealous. Calvin has become successful, famous, and wanted by everyone, while Murph is still being ignored. The next day, Calvin visits Tracy at his house. He tells Tracy how upset he is, because Murph feels unwanted, since no parents want to adopt him. Calvin also mentions that their exams are coming up. Tracy starts helping Calvin with math in a fun, playful way. Tracy suggests that Calvin call Murph and invite him over. Calvin does, and soon Murph joins them. For the first time in a while, Murph laughs, relaxes, and enjoys himself with them. Later, Calvin returns to the orphanage and and tells his friends about Tracy's family problems. He explains that Tracy is distant from his parents and doesn't get along with them. Calvin's friends give him an idea. Maybe Calvin can help reunite Tracy with his parents. The next day, Calvin visits Tracy again, but this time he makes a huge mistake. Without asking Tracy, Calvin secretly invites Tracy's father to the house. When Tracy finds out, he explodes in anger. He yells at Calvin, scolds him harshly, and throws him out of the house. After this fight, the Knights start losing match after match. The tension between Calvin and Tracy affects the entire team. They stop talking to each other, and because of that broken bond, the whole team begins to fall apart. Back at the orphanage, more parents arrive to adopt Calvin. Once again, Calvin believes none of them will feel right. Biddleman suggests something new. He tells Calvin to go out to dinner with them and see how it feels. Before leaving, Calvin hands his special shoes to Murph for safekeeping, asking him to take good care of them. After Calvin leaves, Murph tries on the shoes himself. He jumps around hoping to move like Calvin, but nothing happens. Disappointed, Murph looks at a photo of his mother, the only memory he has of her, and feels completely broken. At that moment, Ox shows up with his friends and Mr. Biddleman. Biddleman starts questioning Murph about the shoes. When Murph refuses to talk, they burn his mother's photo, his last precious memory. Heartbroken, Murph finally tells them the truth about the shoes. With the shoes now in his hands, Biddleman meets with his gambling friends. He places huge bets against the Knights. Biddleman knows the truth. Without the shoes, Calvin won't play well, and if Calvin fails, the Knights will lose. Smiling greedily, Biddleman bets everything on the opposing team, convinced that this time Calvin's magic is finally over. Meanwhile, we see Calvin out at dinner with a potential new family. But once again, things don't feel right. The conversation is awkward, the vibe is off, and Calvin realizes this isn't the family for him. At the same time, Murph and Reg call Calvin before the big game. They tell him the truth. Mr. Biddleman has taken Calvin's shoes from them. Terrified, Calvin rushes straight back to the orphanage. With the help of all the orphanage kids, Calvin manages to tie up Biddleman. Ox is there too, standing on Biddleman's side. But in front of everyone, Biddleman suddenly yells at Ox and insults him. Humiliated and embarrassed, Ox finally realizes the truth. That's the moment Ox switches sides. He goes to the safe, takes out Calvin's hidden shoes, and gives them back to him. Meanwhile, Biddleman calls his gambling friends and orders them to stop Calvin at any cost. But nothing works. Calvin still makes it to the arena. On the way, Biddleman tries to stop him one last time. Calvin pushes past him and sprints straight onto the basketball court. When Calvin looks up at the scoreboard, his heart sinks. The Knights are losing badly. Calvin puts on his shoes and jumps into the game. Once again, he starts dominating the court, overpowering the opposing team. But during one play, multiple players crash into him, and the shoes rip apart. Calvin freezes. Without the shoes, he believes the game is over. That's when Tracy steps in. He encourages Calvin, reminding him that the talent was never in the shoes, it was inside him all along. Trusting Tracy's words, Calvin puts on the new shoes and returns to the game. And even without the magic shoes, Calvin plays the best basketball of his life. With skill, confidence, and heart, he leads the Knights to a final victory. The crowd explodes with joy. After the win, Calvin makes a life-changing decision. He announces that he's done playing for the Knights. He wants to live his life for his friends and for the kids at the orphanage who believed in him from the start. Calvin returns to the orphanage. Soon after, Tracy arrives and tells Calvin he wants to adopt him, but Calvin gently refuses and sets one condition. He says he'll only go if Murph comes with him too. Without hesitation, Tracy agrees. He takes Calvin and Murph home with him. Meanwhile, Reg is adopted by a loving family as well. And in the end, everyone finally gets what they were hoping for. A family, a future, and a happy ending. If you felt that emotion even for a moment, hit the like button, subscribe for more inspiring movie stories, and share this video with someone who needs a little hope today. Because dreams don't come true alone, they come true when we believe together.